Gemini, Ahmed, Essop. The 10 p.m. train glided into Park Station and Siva took his seat. He felt tired after the long hours of work at the Constellation Hotel. He closed his eyes, but instead of the inertia that usually overcame him until the train reached Lenasia, his imagination crowded with the faces of people he had served, wines, dinners, delicacies at the hotel. Faces lit with gaiety of affluent businessmen, brokers, professional men, and doll-like women. His life was on the periphery of their lives, he reflected. A dark figure in a stereotype outfit, maroon jacket, white shirt, black bow tie, grey trousers, and black shoes, moving from table to table, booklet and pencil in hand, noting the requirements dictated by the diner's appetites. Then there was the gathering of the food-stained crockery and cutlery, and the uneaten remains that always filled him with nausea. Was he born for this? To be at the beck and call of sirs and madams and to assist in satisfying their appetites. The train sped into the night. As the city lights receded in swift succession, he was filled with a sense of self-pitying bitterness. He could have been a doctor or a teacher, belated sterile ambitions that were always part of his thoughts. A man engaged in serving others nobly. He had frittered away his chance at school by neglecting his studies, finding pleasure in roving with a gang, wasting time in cinemas and cafes and smoking in corners. His teachers had at first castigated him, but later abandoned him. He failed twice in Standard 6 and then left school. The train stopped at Orlando Station and Siva looked through the open window. The brilliance of the city had vanished, and but for the glowing station lights, sprawling Soweto was in penumbra. He heard several shouts, banging of doors, and the train pressed on into the night. His only consolation was his son Krishna, a 13-year-old boy in Standard 6 at Alpha Primary School. The death of his wife, a self-willed woman quiet to the verge of obstinacy, religious to the point of fanaticism, had knotted the boy to him. For he was now involved in a maternal relationship as well, and nothing gave him greater pleasure than providing him with the delicious bits which he took surreptitiously from the hotel and were even now wrapped in paper beside him. To give his son breakfast before he set off to school, to watch him eat, then admire him dressed in his school uniform, maroon jacket, white shirt, black tie, grey trousers and black shoes, and finally say goodbye, was a daily experience that gave meaning to his existence and hope to his secretly cherished belief that the boy would, by achieving what he himself had not, mend the tear in his life, his personal failure. All that was now ignoble and humiliating in his life would be transcended when Krishna attended university and distinguished himself. The world had changed radically since the days of his own youth, and the new age presented varied opportunities and greater scope. In fact, Krishna had recently written his Standard 6 examination, and the result was expected any day. To see his son growing to be like him in appearance and shape filled him with happiness and pride. As he walked along the scarred, feebly lit roads, a fresh breeze awakened in the summer night. When he reached the first row of houses, he quickened his pace as he was reminded of his sleeping boy. Nearing home, he was surprised to hear voices, and then distinctly the voice of his neighbor, Mrs. Rudy, the good woman who cared for his son after school. "Siva, something happened today," she said as he approached her and several people who stood outside the open door of his house. His mind leaped to Krishna and presaged danger. "There was a fire in your house today," Mrs. Rudy said, "but we managed to put out the flames quickly. Everyone helped." He looked at the group, bewildered, expecting to hear tragic news. He wanted to inquire about his son, but could not. "Krishna is sleeping," Mrs. Rudy said, coming to his rescue, but her words failed to reassure him. A strong presentiment that his son was dead seized his mind. Mrs. Rudy was playing a diabolical sort of game by not telling him the truth. "Only a few things, slightly burnt. Go in and have a look." Siva entered his house, and Mrs. Rudy and the others followed him. He felt as though tragedy was about to engulf him, that within the house he would see the body of his son, his hope, unrecognizably burnt, wrapped in white linen. Within, in the light of the paraffin lamp, everything seemed to be in order, though there was a lingering smell of fire, an amalgam of water, smoke, burnt wood, and cloth. "Only your blankets and bed and chest of drawers." Siva scarcely listened to Mrs. Rudy's recital of burnt items. He went towards the bedroom door, but hesitated to enter. Mrs. Rudy took the lamp which was on the table and entered the room. "Krishna is sleeping," she whispered, placing the lamp on the chest of drawers. "Don't wake him." Siva looked at his son, partly covered with a blanket, saw his sleep-sealed eyes and heard him breathing. "Thank you, Mrs. Rudy," he whispered as a pressure within, a strangling sensation, began to ease. "I'll tell you everything tomorrow," Mrs. Rudy said, leaving the room and joining the others. It was late. They would talk to Siva about the fire the next day. But Mrs. Rudy had already resolved that she would not tell the father that his boy had accidentally started a fire while lighting a cigarette. Siva sat down on the bed beside his son, feeling weak and tired. He closed his eyes. The rhythmic sound of Krishna's breathing roused him into a state of alert wakefulness. He took the lamp and examined the room. He saw his bed, the mattress and blankets partially singed. Next to his bed was the chest of drawers. One side had caught a light and was black. Everything else seemed untouched by the fire. He placed the lamp on the chest of drawers and then opened the top drawer to examine the contents. He took out some calendars and put them beside the lamp, some pencils, a comb, a bottle of perfume left by a woman at the hotel, a gilt cigarette case also from the hotel, a few envelopes tied with string. He untied the string and opened the envelopes. These contained his birth certificate, marriage certificate, identity document, bank savings book, and Standard 6 school report. Yellow and brittle. Under pressure of some inner necessity, he had always kept the report as though it were some sort of astrologer's horoscope, having strong links with his destiny. He opened the report carefully, saw the name of the school he had attended and the marks he had achieved in various subjects. Then he read his teacher's final comment. Siva has not applied himself to his studies. He must spend another year in the same standard. The comment filled him as it always filled him when reading it with sadness. He folded the report carefully and replaced it in the envelope. He gathered all the envelopes, tied them with a string, and replaced them in the drawer. There was a knock at the door and Mrs. Rudy entered. "Krishna left it with me to give it to you," she said, handing him an envelope. "It is his school report." She went out quietly. He stood beside the lamp and looked at the envelope for a while. A tremor passed through him and his hands quivered. He opened the envelope, took out the report, unfolded it, saw the low marks attained by his son and read the final comment. "Krishna has failed. Another year in Standard 6 may prove more rewarding." Siva looked at the paper as if it had suddenly come into his hands, as though the turbid light from the lamp had been magically transmuted into a white sheet, its brittle whiteness imposing itself on his vision, inflicting its luminous reality. His body shook in trepidation. The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor like some wounded bird. His limbs softened as he stepped towards his son's bed and, sagging down, stretched out his hand to touch him.